Philosophical Foundation, Part 5. Good day, everyone. So I am Ivy Versazamana, and today I'll be reporting about philosophies of education. Education is not about teaching and learning. It is also guided by different philosophical beliefs that shape how we understand knowledge, learning, and the role of teachers and students. In this discussion, we'll explore the major philosophies of education, their key principles, and how they influence educational practices. By understanding these philosophies, we gain a clearer view of why teachers teach the way they do and how education aims to develop learners not just intellectually, but also morally and socially. So before tackling different philosophies of education, it is essential to have a good understanding of the meaning of philosophy. So what is philosophy? So philosophy is from Greek word philos, means love, and sophia means wisdom. So therefore, philosophy means love of wisdom. But I also have here definitions from the books. First is, philosophy is the science that seeks to organize and systematize all fields of knowledge as a means of understanding and interpreting the totality of reality. So this is according to the Book of Good, page 395. Okay, so our next definition is, philosophy is the attempt to give reasoned conception of the universe and of man's place in it. So this is according to the book of W.P. Montagne, La Cuesta, and other authors, page 45. Next is, philosophy is a complete philosophy includes a worldview or a reasoned conception of the whole cosmos and the life view or doctrine of values, meanings, and purposes of life. So this is according to the book of J.A. Layton, La Cuesta, and other authors, page 45. So our last definition is, philosophy is a search for a comprehensive view of nature, an attempt at a universal explanation of the nature of things. So this is according to the book of A. Weber, La Cuesta, and other authors, page 45 to 46. So summing up, philosophy means a systematic and logical explanation of the nature, existence, purpose, and relationship of things, including human beings in the universe. After understanding what philosophy is, it is important to know its three main branches. The first is metaphysics, the second is the epistemology, and last one is axiology. So these branches serves as the foundation of philosophical thought. They help us explore questions about reality, knowledge, and values, the very things that influence how we think, act, and educate. So each branch focuses on a specific aspect of human understanding. Now let's define what is metaphysics. Metaphysics deals with the first principles. It is the origin and the essence of things. It is the causes and the end of things. It is ontology, the science of existence, and or being. So the questions that answer metaphysics are, what is the true nature of reality? The second is, what is his place in the universe? And the last one is, what is his purpose? Now let's come to epistemology. Epistemology deals with knowledge and with ways of knowing. The different kinds of knowledge are conceptual, perceptual, and intuitive. So conceptual, these are the ideas formed in mind, while perceptual, these are the knowledge gained through the senses. And the intuitive is the cognition of a thing independent of reason, inference, or cause. So the questions to be answered by epistemology are, what is knowledge and how do we acquire knowledge? Now let's go to axiology. So axiology is theology which deals with purpose and values. This includes ethics and aesthetics. So what is ethics? It is the idea of what is right and what is wrong, the good and evil. Aesthetics, it deals with beauty and ugliness. So, questions about religious, social, political, or economic values are concern of axiology. So, now that we have discussed the main branches of philosophy, let's move on to the philosophy of education. So, the philosophy of education is the application of philosophical ideas and principles to the field of teaching and learning. It helps us understand the purpose of education, the role of the teachers and students, and the kind of knowledge and values that should be taught in schools. In simple terms, it answers questions like, why we educate, what should students learn, how should teachers teach. So, through the philosophy of education, we are able to shape educational goals, methods, and system based on different philosophical beliefs. It also guides teachers in developing their personal teaching styles and understanding their learners more deeply. So, a philosophy of education is a set of beliefs and values that guides teaching and learning, addressing fundamental questions about the purpose of education, the roles of teachers and students, and the nature of knowledge. So after understanding what philosophy of education is, let us now explore the major philosophies of education. So these philosophies serve as guiding frameworks that explain how education should be carried out, what should be taught, how it should be taught, and what goals schools should aim to achieve. Each philosophy offers a unique perspective on teaching and learning. Some focus on knowledge and discipline, while others emphasize experience, individuality, and personal growth. So the first major philosophy of education is idealism. So what is idealism? Idealism is a philosophical doctrine which holds the view that ideas are the only reality. Hence, for the idealist, there is no external reality and that the world is consist of ideas. So for this reason, the idealists argue that material things do not really exist. For the idealist, material things are not real because they are mutable and destructible. This is because whatever that is mutable and destructible keeps on changing, and whatever that keeps on changing cannot be considered real. Only ideas are real for the idealist because ideas do not change. They are immutable and indestructible. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato was the well-known figure in idealism. Plato believed that physical world is not real because the physical world constantly changes. In his seminal work titled The Republic, Plato introduced the two kinds of world, namely the world of forms or ideas and the world of matter. So according to Plato, any material that exists in the world of matter is just a copy of the objects that exist in the world of forms. So the next philosophy of education is naturalism. So what is naturalism? Naturalism is a philosophical doctrine which holds the belief that matter is the ultimate reality. So in naturalism, the material world is the only real world and that it is governed by natural laws. Nature is the ultimate reality. It is governed by natural laws that interpretations and explanations of the material world must emanate from these internal laws. It is best if children are encouraged to learn with nature. So it gives children full freedom as they can learn whatever they want. So the senses are the gateway of knowledge and that learning would naturally happen if we open our senses to whatever nature will reveal to us. The perfect natural development of the learner, enhanced self-expression on the part of the learner as well as to prepare the learner for future struggles. So the role of the teacher in naturalism is to facilitate the learning process by creating learning situations so that learners will have the opportunity to learn naturally by themselves. So the teachers need to take time to understand the needs, capacities, interests, and desires of their students. So what do you think could be the possible method of teaching in naturalism? So the possible method of teaching in naturalism is learning by doing or learning by experience method. So these methods ensures active involvement of students in the teaching and learning process. It also promotes self-government and self-effort on the part of the students. The other method is the observation method. So students observe their surroundings, the environment, people, and things. Now let's come to pragmatism. So who is the leading proponent of pragmatism? So the leading proponent of pragmatism is John Dewey. So according to John Dewey, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So pragmatism evaluates the truth and meaning of ideas according to their physical consequences and practical value. It emphasizes the need to test the validity of ideas by acting on them. So if something works, it is true. So students should be encouraged to do researches and apply them into the solution of the problem. So students should believe that the function of education is to enhance human potential to be able to adapt to a constantly changing world. So who are the pragmatist teachers? The pragmatist teachers believes that education is an experimental process. So they also believes that children should learn how to make difficult decisions by considering the consequences of their actions on others. They also believe that education should focus in the real-life problems to be prepared to live fully and effectively in society. So the pragmatist teachers also believe that students should learn the process of problem solving rather than by being passive learners as knowledge is being transmitted to them. So the pragmatist teachers also believe in values clarification rather than blindly accepting inherited values. Then lastly, the pragmatist teachers believe that communication technologies such as an email and internet provide opportunities to share ideas, insights, and experiences. Let's come now to supernaturalism and humanism. Supernaturalism has a dual purpose. First is to educate the individual for his life here on earth, and the second is prepare him for his life beyond. While humanism is the philosophy of education places spiritual things over and above worldly things. Man is both matter, and spiritual will must prevail over his material and worldly desires for him to avoid sinning and to attain spiritual perfection. Now let us come to essentialism. What is essentialism? Essentialism is a philosophy of education that emphasizes teaching a core set of essential knowledge, skills, and values that are fundamental for every individual. So the main goal of essentialism is to equip individuals with the fundamental knowledge and skills necessary to function effectively and responsibly in the society. So essentialism gives importance to basic academic disciplines such as reading, writing, arithmetic and grammar, social science, and history and geography, health and physical education, elementary science and arts, work and domestic education, civics, character education, and citizenship. So here are the rules of the teacher and the students. The teacher's role is the authority figure who guides learning and ensure mastery of essential knowledge, while the students is the learner who must study diligently and achieve standards set by the curriculum. So essentialism in education focuses on teaching essential and universal knowledge, maintains rigorous academic standards, prepares learners for productive roles in society, believes in a fixed structured curriculum guided by experts, and views education as the means to develop disciplined, literate, and responsible citizens. Now let's come to realism. So what is realism? Realism is a philosophy that asserts that reality exists independently of human thought. So in education, realism emphasizes that knowledge comes from the objective world and that learners must understand and adapt to this real physical environment. So the main proponent of realism is Aristotle. So he believed that reality exists in the world of objects and can be known through sensory experience and reasoning. The aim of realism in education is to help learners understand and live effectively in the real world by acquiring factual knowledge and practical skills. So here are the principles of realism in education. First is reality is independent of the mind. Second, education should be based on the real world. Third, knowledge is objective. Fourth, discipline and order. And the last one is science-based learning. So here are the roles of the teacher in realism. So the teacher is a guide and authority who presents the real facts about the world. They also help students develop logical thinking, reasoning, and understanding of objective truths. They also use demonstrations, experiments, and real-life examples to make learning meaningful. While the role of the student is a rational being who learns through senses and reasoning, students are encouraged to observe, analyze, and question the real world around them, and they must learn to apply knowledge to real-life situations. Now let's come to progressivism. What is progressivism? Progressivism is a philosophy of education that emphasizes learning by doing and focuses on the development of the whole child, intellectually, socially, emotionally, and physically. So it believes that education should be student-centered, experience-based, and adaptable to change. So, the main proponent of progressivism is John Dewey. He believed that education should be based on experience and interaction with the environment. So, the aim of progressivism is to prepare learners to adapt to changing world through critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration. So, it aims to develop active, responsible, and socially aware individuals who can contribute to democracy and to improve the society. So, the role of the teacher in progressivism is the teacher is a facilitator or guide, not an authoritarian figure. The teacher encourages exploration, questioning, and creativity. So the teacher designs learning experiences that relate to real-life situations. And lastly, the teacher promotes a democratic classroom where students learn cooperation and responsibility. While the role of the student is the center of the learning process, and they learn through doing, experimenting, and reflecting. They work collaboratively with others and engages in projects, and they develop skills for lifelong learners and social participation. So the last major philosophy of education is existentialism. What is existentialism? So existentialism is a philosophy of education that focuses on the individual's freedom, choice, and personal responsibility. So it emphasizes that education should help learners find meaning and purpose in their own lives. Rather than following a fixed curriculum or universal truth, existentialism believes that each person must create their own values and understanding of the world through personal experiences and choices. So the proponents of existentialism are Jean-Paul Sartre, Soren Kierkegaard, and Martin Heidegger. So Jean-Paul Sartre believed that existence precedes essence, meaning that people are not born with a fixed purpose but must define themselves through their action, while Soren Kierkegaard emphasized individual faith, choice, and personal commitment. And Martin Heidegger also contributed to the existential view of education centered on human relationships and authentic living. The main aim of existentialism in education is to help learners discover themselves, develop individuality, and make responsible choices. Education should focus on the whole person, emotions, wills, and personal values, rather than only the intellect. So the roles of the teacher in existentialism is the teacher acts as a facilitator and counselor rather than a strict authority figure. They help students understand themselves and support them in making independent decisions. They encourages open dialogue, respect for different perspectives, and emotional expression. And lastly, they guide the students to take responsibility for their own learning. So the role of the student in existentialism is an individual with freedom and responsibility. They must take ownership of their learning and discover personal meaning through experience. The students learns to make authentic choices and accept the consequences. And lastly, they develop self-awareness, emotional maturity, and personal integrity.
Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone. My topics are the educational philosophies of frontier thinkers of education, the educational philosophies of Filipino educators, and factors affecting philosophies of education. I'm Regine Cerolio, the second discussant of our group report on philosophical foundation. Let's have the educational philosophies of frontier thinkers of education. The following are the educational philosophies of the pioneer thinkers of education. We have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Comenius, Locke, Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Herbart, Froebel, Spencer, William James, John Dewey, and Jesus Christ. Okay, let's have number 1, Socrates. The end of life is knowledge. Knowledge is virtue. Know thyself. Socrates taught that learning started with asking questions about ourselves and the world. For example, instead of just reading a story, we ask, why did the character act that way? That's using our thinking to learn deeply. Social and individual interests should be harmonized. Believe that our personal goals should match what's good for others. Like, for example, when we work in groups and share ideas instead of just doing it in our own way, he wanted people to be thoughtful citizens. For him, learning not just for themselves but to help their community too. Oneself is rational and universal. Every person has a rational mind and can seek truth. It means we all have the ability to think and learn, no matter who we are. Whether you're solving a math problem or reading a story, Socrates believed we can use reason to understand it. That's why he asked questions instead of giving answers. He wanted students to thank them for themselves. Okay, let's have play 2. Each person should devote his life for that which he is best fitted to do. Play to believe that everyone has a special talent or strength. Education should help us discover it and use it to serve society. For example, if you're good at drawing, you should become an artist. Am I right? Okay. B. The function of education is to determine what each individual is by nature fitted to do. Plato saw education as a tool to uncover our natural abilities, not just to memorize facts. Like when we try different subjects in school, to see what we enjoy most, or for students to see what they enjoy most. That's why schools teach reading, math, science, and arts, and so on. So students can explore and discover their strengths. Okay, social justice. Give what is due to whom it is due. Plato believed in fairness. Everyone should get what they deserve based on their rule and effort. For example, if someone works hard, they should be rewarded fairly. Intellectual aristocracy, the rule of the intellectual elite. Plato thought that smartest and wisest people should lead society, not just the richest or the strongest. For example, like having teachers or scientists that help make big decisions. Because he believed leaders should be trained thinkers who care about truth and justice, not just power. And also for Plato, learning isn't just for school, it's for life. Okay, let's have Aristotle. Virtue is not possession of knowledge but state of the will. Aristotle believed that being good isn't just about knowing what's right, it's about choosing to do it. The end of education is not knowledge alone, but the union of the intellect and the will, or knowledge expressed in action. Because for him, it's not enough to know kindness. We have to show it. Reality, not ideas but the performance, is the highest function. Like for example, learning about honesty in class should lead to telling the truth in real life. Adaptation of education to the form of government, as education should match the kind of government we have. Okay, it should match. Objective and scientific, not introspective method of education. Aristotle's method of education is objective and scientific, focusing on observation, logic, and practical experience, not introspection. He believed that knowledge comes from the senses and reason, and education should develop both intellectual and moral virtues through habit and action. Introspection alone, for him, was not a reliable path to truth. Okay, next we have Comenius. Development of the whole man. Comenius wanted education to develop the whole person, the mind, body, and spirit. Like for example, teaching, reading, exercise, and good behavior. Follow the order of nature. Okay? We just teach simple things first, then harder ones. Train for character. For him, character training was as essential as intellectual learning, aiming to create wise, virtuous, and socially responsible citizens. Both sexes should be included in education. Yes, because education is for all. Okay, let's have luck. Tabula rasa or blank paper theory. A child is born with a blank mind, neither or good nor bad. Blank. Luck belief. Children are born like blank paper, ready to be shaped by experience. So it means that whatever we teach really matters. Education can shape the pupil according to the will of the teacher, because he said teachers can guide the students to become good people. Formal discipline. Training gained in one area can be applied in another area. Okay. As an skills learned in one subject can help in others, like using math, logic, and science. If I'm not mistaken, it's what we call integration. Okay. Sometimes we integrate in some area of subject, we integrate values. Okay. Next, we have Rousseau. Development of the child according to his nature. Rousseau thought education should follow the child's natural growth. So for him, we don't have to rush the children to learn. A man should live a simple life. He also believed that a simple life close to nature helps develop moral character. The child, the important factor in education. For him, the child is central to education, not the teacher or the curriculum. Use of instinctive tendencies as the starting point of education. Let's have Pestalozzi. Education as the process of organized growth. For Pestalozzi, growth must be nurtured step by step, starting from the child's immediate environment and expanding outward. All education should be founded upon the laws of natural development of the child. Pestalozzi believe children grow in stages physically, mentally, and emotionally, and education must follow this rhythm. Teachers, future teachers, guide, not force, development, creating a loving and structured environment where children can flourish naturally. Use of objects in teaching. Pestalozzi believed that children learn best through their senses, their sense of touch or anything that's using senses. Instead of abstract words alone, he introduced objects lesson using everyday items like stones, leaves, or even household tools to teach concepts in math, language, and science. His approach laid the foundation for modern experiential learning, proving that when children touch, see, and explore, they don't just memorize, they understand. Emphasis on method and technique of teaching. He believed learning should follow a structured path from simple to complex, matching the child's natural development. For him, good teaching must just about care, but about using thoughtful steps to guide understanding. Okay, let's have Herbert. Doctrine of a perception. Herbert thought that the mind connects with the world around it. He believed in scientific teaching and the idea of a perception, linking new ideas to what we already know. Education should be scientific. For example, like learning about planets by first talking about Earth. Mind is the unity possessing but one power, that of entering into relation with its environment. It helps students build understanding step by step. Okay. Froebel. Self-activity as the means of development. Froebel said, children learns best through play hands-on activities. That's true. Play, spontaneous activity, manual and industrial development utilized to promote self-realization. So, playing isn't just for fun. It's for them to learn. It's learning. Process of education determined by the nature of the child because he believed self-activity helps kids grow and discover themselves. Okay, have Spencer. Acknowledge that is best for use in life is also best for the development of power. Spencer believed useful knowledge is the best kind. He emphasized science and physical education. Emphasis on physical education. So learning how to stay healthy and solve problem is important. Importance of science in the curriculum. He wanted education to prepare students for real life. Okay. Let's have William James. Mental activity is functional. James said mental activity is functional. Our minds work to solve problems. Of course, knowledge is instrumental. In this view, knowledge isn't about mirroring reality perfectly, but about being useful. For example, a scientific theory is valuable not because it's eternally true, but because it helps us predict, explain, or control aspect of the world. Okay. It is the consequences that make the choice good or bad. For James, a choice isn't good or bad in theory. It's good if it leads to beneficial outcomes, and bad if it causes harms or fail to work. Okay, let's have John Dewey. Education is life. Education is life. For him, he saw education as a continuous process of growth, where students actively engage with their environment and learn by doing. In short, Dewey viewed education as life itself, not a rehearsal, but the real thing. For example, when a child learning to read gradually improves comprehension, vocabulary, and confidence. Each step builds on the last. This is growth through experience. Okay, education is growth. Do we believe education should help individuals develop intellectually, emotionally, and morally? It's not just about gaining facts. It's about becoming more capable and adaptable. Education is a social process. Okay, education is a social process because for him, learning happens through interaction. For example, in a group project, students collaborate, share ideas, and learn to respect different viewpoints. Learning happens through interaction. Okay, D. Education is a continuous reconstruction experience. As for him, education builds on past experiences and reshapes them. Each new learning moment helps in reinterpret previous one, creating a cycle of growth and understanding. Okay, last we have Jesus Christ. Right relationship, right relationship with God should precede all kinds and types of education. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Matthew chapter 6 verse 33. As Jesus taught that education should begin with a right relationship with God. He said, seek first the kingdom of God. Okay, God first. Education should be used for service. Give thyself is the philosophy of service of Jesus. So, for Jesus, learning should help us serve others because he believed in giving yourself to help others. Education with love and purpose. It is an education with love and purpose. And it should be noted that almost all of the above mentioned philosophies of education are applied today. These thinkers teach us that education is not just about books. It's about growing, thinking, doing, and caring. Okay, let's now go to the next topic. the educational philosophies of Filipino educators. Some Filipino educators also develop their own philosophies of education. The Filipino philosophies of education are comparable to, or in some cases more sound or practical than, the philosophies of education of the great educational thinkers of the past. Okay. Okay, the following are the Filipinos of education according to Bernardo and Fresnoza. We have Rizal. The school is the book in which is written the future of the nations. Show us the schools of our people, and we will tell you what those people are. Okay. From Rizal. Rizal said, the school is the book in which is written the future of the nations. What do you think that means? It means that how we teach kids today will affect the country tomorrow. If schools teach honesty, hard work, and love for a country, the future citizens will reflect those values. Next, Mabini. Thou shalt cultivate the special gifts which had been granted thee, working and studying according to thy ability, never leaving the path of righteousness and justice in order to attain thine own perfection. Mabini. Because Mabini believed we should use our talents wisely and always stay on the path of justice. So if you're good at writing, you should use it to help others, not just for yourself. Education should help you grow while staying kind and fair. Next, we have the Tish Pardo de Tavera. Our education should instill love for work, spirit of tolerance, respect for law, love for peace, and practice of thrift. Tavera wanted education to teach love for work, peace, and respect for law. Like example, like learning to be responsible and follow rules in school, because he believed education should build good habits for life. We have George Bukubu. To my humble way of thinking, education, as for its supreme and overshadowing aim, the formulation of a sound and noble outlook of life. Bukubo said college should help students develop a noble view of life. So it's not just about getting a job, it's not about becoming a good person. Education should shape your values and how you see the world. Next, Camilo Usayas. Education must secure freedom, efficiency, and happiness for all people. Usayas believe education should bring freedom, efficiency, and happiness to all. So learning should help us live better lives. It's about helping people reach their full potential and enjoy life. Then, Rafael Palma. Rafael Palma says that education must produce individuals who are both useful to themselves and to society. Palma said education should make people helpful to themselves and others. For example, like learning skills that help me and my community, whether it's farming, teaching, or fixing things. Education should benefit everyone. Let's have Francisco Benitez. The qualities that should distinguish the educated Filipinos of today are power to do, knowledge of the past and current events, possession of the elements of conduct that are the accomplishments of culture, and morality. Benitez described the ideal Filipino as someone who can do things well, knows history and current events, has good character. So it's not just about being smart. It's about being capable and kind. A well-rounded person is the goal of education. Okay, let's have Venancio Trinidad. Education should aim to develop men and women who are really concerned in the development and uplift of our communities, particularly in the rural areas, as in the promotion of their own personal or individual well-being. Trinidad believed education should help people improve their communities, especially in rural areas, like helping farmers learn better ways to grow crops. Education should uplift both individual and the places they live. Okay, those are the Filipinos educators. So what do these Filipino educators teach us? Okay, educator teach us that education should help us grow, serve others, and build a better nation, better Philippines. Okay, now let's go to factors affecting philosophies of education. Of course, there are factors that affects philosophies of education. We have the existing knowledge, social ideals of the society, interest of influential groups in that society, personal experience and vision of educational leaders, and individual temperament. Okay, let's have first the existing knowledge. Educational ideas are shaped by what we already know from science, psychology and history. So if we learn that kids learn better through play, schools might use more games. If psychology shows that children learn by doing, teachers will use hands-on activities. Okay, and social ideals of the society. What a society believes in, like freedom, equality, or discipline, affects its education system. Like if a country values democracy, it might give free education to everyone. Free education to everyone. That's called universal education, and it reflects the belief that everyone deserves a chance to learn. Interest of influential groups in that society. For example, some powerful groups like government leaders or business owners can push for certain educational goals. So, if companies want more tech workers, schools might teach more computer skills. Okay, education often respond to what society needs or demands. Okay. Okay, personal experience and vision of educational leaders. Okay, like great educators like Rizal or Dewey shaped education based on their own experiences and dreams. Like how Rizal believed schools shape the future of the nation. His vision helped inspire schools that focus on national pride and character, and the individual temperament, even personal traits like being creative or practical, can influence someone's philosophy. So a teacher who loves art might believe in creative learning. Our personalities affect how we think learning should happen. The conditioning knowledge is derived from the biological, psychological, sociological, and historical fields. Dominant social ideals of the particular group of that particular period, pressures from active and influential vested interests, ideas of leaders from the frontier thinkers in education, individual temperament, and from the beliefs of the individual holder of the particular philosophy. For example, in the implementation of the Keto 12 curriculum, where it reflects these influences responding to developmental needs, aligning with global standards, promoting national ideals of holistic development, and incorporating the visions of reform-minded policy makers. In biological and psychological factors, where studies showed Filipino students were developmentally unprepared for college or employment after just 10 years of schooling. That's why we have the K-12. The additional years allow for better cognitive, emotional, and skill development before entering adulthood. In sociological and historical contexts, where historically we are aware that the Philippines had one of the shortest education cycles globally. This limited Filipino graduates' competitiveness abroad, aligning with international standards was seen as necessary for global mobility and recognition. Okay, in dominant social ideals, where the reform reflected a national ideal of producing holistically developed citizens ready for work, entrepreneurship, or higher education, where it emphasized 21st century skills like critical thinking, collaboration, and digital literacy. Invested interest in business sectors and labor groups pushed for graduates with job-ready skills. Their influence led to the inclusion or technical vocational tracks and work immersion programs, aligning educators with market needs. Also, the ideas from the frontier thinkers in education. As for educational leaders, like former DepEd Secretary Armin Luis True, promoted learner-centered and outcome-based education. Their philosophies shaped the curriculum's focus on flexibility and relevance. Also, we have the individual temperament. Teachers' personal openness to change affected implementation. Some embraced new methods like performance-based assessment, while others resisted due to lack of training or increased workload. Another is the belief of the philosophy holder, where policymakers and educators who believed in constructivist learning, where students build knowledge through experience, designed the curriculum to include contextualized learning and real-world applications, logical and psychological factors. Why? Because studies showed Filipino students were developmentally unprepared for college or employment after just 10 years of schooling. That's why we have now the K to 12. Okay, so we learn from my report that the educational philosophies are shaped by science, society, leaders, and even our personality. Understanding these factors help us see why schools are different in every place and time, and how we can improve them. That's all. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Thank you.
A blessed day to each and everyone. I am Liani Nunez Labian, and I'm going to continue the discussion of the previous discussant, wherein I am assigned to discuss the following topics. First is the functions of the philosophies of education. The second one is the importance of the philosophy of education to the teachers. And the third one, a teacher's philosophy of teaching. I have here the functions of philosophies of education. So, philosophies of education are important because they perform a certain functions that make the educational system effective and efficient. So, these functions of philosophies of education are the following. So, we have here the 4 functions. First, to provide guidelines in the information of educational policies and programs and in the construction of curricula. The second one is to provide direction toward which all of educational efforts should be exerted. The third one is provide theories and hypotheses in education which may be tested for their effectiveness and efficiency. The last one is provide norms or standards for evaluation purposes. So, in order for us to understand more about the functions, I have to discuss it one by one. The first one is to provide guidelines in the formulation of educational policies and programs in the construction of curricula. So, philosophy provides a framework for principles and values that helps shape the following. We have the educational policies wherein the rules, the goals, and the directions of educational system is being provided. And also the educational programs wherein plans and activities designed to achieve those goals. And lastly is the curricula wherein the content and the structure of what the students have learned. So, for instance, bilingual in English and Filipino has been adopted as a philosophy of education. Hence, a bilingual policy has been formulated where English and Filipino have to be studied side by side. From the elementary to tertiary level, English, mathematics, and science should be taught in English, and other subjects in elementary and tertiary should be taught in Filipino. In short, philosophy of education acts as a blueprint or a compass, ensuring the educational decisions and policy making to curriculum designing are coherent, purposeful, and aligned with societal and moral values. The second functions of the philosophies of education is that to provide directions toward which all educational efforts should be exerted. As a universal education
is adopted as a philosophy of education in the elementary level. To implement this philosophy, the government should, number one, establish elementary schools all over the country which are accessible to all children at school age. So here in the Philippines, we already adopted or we already implemented this elementary school all over the country, which is accessible to all the children of school age. Of course, build schools across the country so that all children old enough for school can easily attend. The second one is make elementary education free to enable all children to go to school. Of course, here in the country, we have this free tuition, free schooling from elementary and of course until tertiary level for some of the public schools here in the Philippines. Make elementary school free so that all children can go to school. The third one is admit all children for school age irrespective of region, creed, race, or ethnic origin. So it is already implemented here in the Philippines. So all children can go to school no matter where they came from or what their religion or race is. So this number three philosophy that has been adopted is already implemented here in the Philippines. So the government should provide also schooling for the handicaps such as physically deformed, deaf, mutes, blinds, and mentally retarded. So here in the Philippines, they have already implemented, but not across the country because there were only cities or places that schools has been provided for the handicaps. But remote areas, islands, there were no schools for the handicaps. So hopefully in the future, all schools, the government should provide or should implement a school for the handicaps. Okay, this functions ensures that every educational activities, teaching, learning, curriculum designing, and assessment is guided by a clear vision. So we should have a vision for the education seeks to achieve. Of course, we cannot achieve those kinds of designs, curriculum designing without the vision. In short, philosophy of education provides direction toward which all educational efforts should be exerted by determining the aims, the values, and ultimate purpose of education, the full development of the person, and the betterment of the society. So, moving. The third functions of the philosophies of education is that to provide theories and hypotheses in education which may be tested for their effectiveness and efficiency. So, to formulate educational theories and hypotheses that can be examined and evaluated through practices and researches, philosophy helps generate ideas how to learn or how learning occurs, which methods are most effective, and what outcomes education should be aimed for. These ideas became theories and hypotheses that educators can test in real classroom settings to determine the effectiveness and efficiency. So, to take the philosophy, self-activity as the means of development. The hypothesis is that children learn better and faster if they actually do what are required in the lesson. So to test the hypothesis, we have to group them into two. Of the children are taught how to swim. So one group means to lecture only, and the other group means by lecture and by actual swimming. After a certain period, the two groups are made to swim to see which group has learned better. If actually swimming in the water does better, it may be concluded that learning by doing or self-activity is better method of learning. So in short, philosophy of education provides theories and hypotheses in education which may be tested for their effectiveness and efficiency, serving as a foundation for improving educational practices and guiding scientific inquiry in education. The fourth functions is that to provide norms or standards for evaluation purposes. So we have here to take, for instance, the philosophy of universal education. After a sufficient period of implementing the philosophy, a survey may be conducted if the implementation has been successful. If the survey reveals that all the children have gone through elementary education, it may be concluded that the philosophy has been implemented successfully. So, this refers to which educational practices, programs, and outcomes can be evaluated and improved. Through philosophy, educators can determine what is good, right, and worthwhile in education, helping them judge whether teaching methods, the curricula, and the learning experiences achieve the intended goals. In short, philosophy of education provides norms or standards for evaluation purposes by setting a criteria for judging the value, the effectiveness, and the worth of educational process and outcomes. So, that is all for the functions of the philosophies of education. Moving forward with our discussion, the importance of philosophy of education to the teachers. So understanding the importance of educational philosophy of teachers, the philosophy of education serve as a very crucial foundation for teachers, guiding their practices and decision makings. It also helps educators comprehend the purpose of education and the intended outcomes of their students. By exploring various educational philosophies, teachers can align their methods with their values, enriching both their teaching and their students' learning. Philosophy of education is very important for the teacher because of the following. So we have number 1, provides the teacher with a basis for making his decision concerning his work. So a philosophy of education makes the teacher uses his judgment in terms of the philosophy instead of using his judgment in terms of custom, tradition, and superstitions, because guides teaching decision. It helps teachers decide what, how, and why to teach. And also it helps the teacher have a clear reason or guide for chooses his makes in his teaching. The second one is helps the teachers develop a wide range of interest, attitude, and values concomitant to his professional life as a teacher. So a philosophy of education does not involve one interest, but all interest. Attitude or value, but involves several. Take, for instance, nationalism. As mentioned before, there are many ways of teaching nationalism, such as flag ceremony, teaching of history, study of biographies of national heroes, military trainings, music, teaching values, and other more. We know that it helps the teacher build positive values and interests that makes better for his or her job. Okay, the third one is that makes teacher more aware of his own life and work, and make him more dynamic, discriminating, critical, and mentally alert. He or she must not lose his sense of direction provided by his philosophy of education and cannot afford to make mistakes, because we all know it helps the teachers understand himself or herself and his work better, making him more active, thoughtful, and aware of his or her teaching. It helps the teacher be more self-aware, alert, and thoughtful in his work. And number 4 is that philosophy of education saves time, money, and effort. If a teacher has a valid and definite philosophy of education to follow, he does not waste his time, money, and effort in trying other philosophies that catch his attention. So, the philosophy of education helps teachers use their time, money, and energy more wisely. And it helps teachers more work smarter than harder. Moving forward with the last topic that I'm going to discuss is that a teacher's philosophy of teaching. A teacher's philosophy, understanding the foundation of effective teaching and learning practices. A teacher's philosophy of teaching represents their unique belief and values about education. This philosophy shapes their approach to instructions, influence decision-making, and ultimately affect student engagement. And of course, recognizing its significance helps educators build a solid foundation for effective teaching practices and foster students' growth and success. It is also important that a teacher develops his own philosophy of education, or more especially, philosophy of teaching to serve as his guide in performance of his duties as a teacher. So, the teacher's philosophy of teaching should be characterized by the following. So here are the characterization of the teacher's philosophy. Number 1, in accord with the philosophy of education of the state and that of the educational institution he serves. So it means a teacher's philosophy should match the educational or the education goals and values of the country and the school where they work. And also, a teacher should follow the ideas about education and that governs the school believe in. The second characteristic is that the teacher's philosophy of teaching must have a religious outlook. If he teaches in a Christian community, he must have a Christian outlook and so-called missionary spirit. Because we all know, as a teacher, we should teach according to the religion of the community and show care and services to the Christian community. And the third characteristic is that the teacher's philosophy of teaching must be in accord with acceptable social, spiritual, and ethical standards. A teacher's philosophy should follow a good social, moral, and spiritual values accepted by the society. As a teacher, we should teach in ways that follows good behavior, morals, and faith. The fourth characterization of teacher's philosophy of teaching should be the teacher's philosophy of teaching must be characterized by love and service for pupils and students. Here, a teacher's philosophy should be based on caring for and helping students. Of course, a teacher should teach with love and a desire to serve their students. The fifth characterization is that the teacher's philosophy of teaching must be characterized by a strong desire to mold the individual child into a self-reliant, independent, and of course, reasonable citizenship equipped with the proper cooperative and leadership qualities. So a teacher's philosophy should be focusing on helping each child become independent, responsible, and capable of working with and leading others. A teacher should aim to help students become confident, independent, and good leaders and team members. So, thank you for listening. I am Liani Nunez Labian, the discussant of those topics.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. This is Lemon Nunez Labian, and I will be the one who's gonna continue. And my topic is all about the sample of a teacher's philosophy in education, or in teaching, to be precise. And now, since we are going to talk about the samples of the teacher's philosophy of teaching, of course, we are going to dwell as well on the types of what follows is a sample of a teacher's philosophy of teaching. It is not a perfect one, but it may serve as a guide for an individual teacher in formulating his own philosophy of teaching. So first of all, the teacher aims and objectives are in accord with the philosophy of education, of the state, and of the school that he serves. So, therefore, in here, it only means that a teacher's goal and teaching practices should align with the educational philosophy and objectives of the both area or state, and the school. And of course, the teacher must ensure the lessons, methods, and values reflect national ideals and the school's mission, promoting consistency and unity in the purpose of education. Second is the teacher is well prepared in terms of lesson, including the mastery of the subject matter. So in this part, of course, every teacher knows their rules. So therefore, they're going to prepare a lots of preparation before the classes start. And one of them is actual lesson planning. And secondly, they're going to prepare such IMs or PowerPoint presentation to make the lesson, the discussion, more engaging and presentable. And thirdly, it follows the punctuality and attendance. Of course, a teacher has this philosophy: attendance is a must, punctuality and attendance is a must, on time. So in self-explanatory, it is what it is. As long as you come in on time or ahead of time before the clock's in, it is one of the philosophies that every teacher abide. And followed by the diligence in teaching. So of course, every teachers are diligent. Or let's say not all, but I believe most of the teachers are diligent because it is their passion in teaching. And of course, since it's their passion, they're really doing their best in terms of injecting knowledge to their learners. And on the fifth part, it's actually fairness in measurement and grading. So in this part, of course, we cannot deny the fact that sometimes teachers really place favoritism. But however, if a teacher really knows that that student really a really good student in the class, so therefore the teacher will not take it as a negative thing that that student really deserves a good grade. And that is an example of fairness in measurement and grading. And now for the sixth part of the types of samples of a teacher's philosophy of teaching is the helpfulness to pupils and students. So therefore, yes, of course, as teachers, we have this passion, or we are compassionate in terms of helping our students to learn. And I think that is one of our goals as teachers. And of course, on the seventh, or followed by a good human relations. So as teachers, we are not just the one who's injecting knowledge. We also have this kind of characters that we tend to extend our horizons. We tend to be more friendly, kind to the parents, to the other stakeholders of the schools. And that is an example of a good human relations. And followed by on the eighth part is always importing acceptable social, spiritual, and ethical values whenever opportunity occurs. So here, of course, it is one of the most important thing. It's because as teachers, we need to impart fairness, acceptable social or spiritual and ethical values. So we stand as a role model to our students. That's why. So therefore, right now, followed by observing professional ethics for teachers, which what I have said, we tend to have limitations and boundaries to our students. We cannot just be friends with them. It's because we have this ethical manners for teachers, ethical considerations as well as teachers. And of course, it follows by the cooperation with peers and obedience to legitimate and decisions of higher authorities. So as what I've said earlier, we tend to cooperate with the other stakeholders of our schools. And in terms of decision making, it really depends on the higher authorities. So and now we're going to talk about the sources of the Philippine philosophy of education. So it should be notated that no educational system has only one philosophy of education. It has to be several philosophies of education. Why is that? Because it varies conditions and situations. Each of calls for a particular philosophy of education that is applicable to a certain area or a certain part. So therefore, we are not following only one philosophy. It really depends on the capability of our learners, of the curriculum that was implemented. So right now, the Philippine educational system has also utilized several philosophies of education. And the sources of such philosophies are the following. And first on the run is actually the great philosophies of education that have stood to the test of time are the following. Like for example, idealism, which follows ideals of a certain person. Naturalism, pragmatism, supernaturalism, or even humanism. And existentialism, progressivism that focuses on the progress of a certain person. And of course, existentialism. So these are the philosophies that we utilizes in education in one way or another. Secondly, it follows that the philosophies of education of the great educational thinkers, among which are of those like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Comenius, and there are other more. And thirdly, the philosophies of education of our great Filipino thinkers. So of course we have Jose Rizal, we have Mabini, Bacobo, Trinidad, and there are other more as well. And then the fourth part is the Philippine Constitution, especially the Article 14 of 1987. This Philippine Constitution, almost all of the provisions of this article are philosophies of education, of our educational system here in the Philippines. And some important laws, such as PD6-A or Educational Act number 1972, and the BP 232, or otherwise known as the Educational Act of 1982. These two are actually the sources that we can actually have some idea. And it follows as well the prevailing social, economic, political, cultural patterns of great magnitude that have a great impact in the society. So take for instance that the crime rate is very high. So of course the philosophy of education that may be adopted, maybe education must be produce men and women with a strong spiritual, moral values in life who become assets instead of liabilities in our society. And right now, since we are done with the samples of a teacher's philosophy of education and as well as the sources of the Philippine philosophy of education, so right now we are going to dwell on what kind of questions that we can actually get from our topic. So one of the question is, what is the meaning of the philosophy? So we have a lot of question here. However, we are just going to answer one. The most basic one. What do you think, or the most important question? So the most important question there is, what do you really think of the meaning of the philosophy? So for me, as an educator, philosophy of education is a teacher's set of beliefs, principles about teaching or learning. So therefore, here in this part, we are like answering what is the purpose of education? What should students learn and why? And how should teachers teach? What kind of teachers technique is necessary for the students? And what kind of values should guide the learning of our students? So since I was able to answer one question, so I hope that some of you as well answer this kind of questions that follows. And that's all for my report. Thank you so much and mabuhay. Again, this is Lamon Nunez Labian